Hi, this is Zach from Warner Wound, and today I'll be taking a look at the Kronaby Apex. So Kronaby is a new brand based out of Sweden. They're under a year old, I believe, and they've just entered the US market. And they are a brand of connected watches. Now, if you've been following Warner Wound for some time, you'll know that we've mentioned smartwatches and connected watches, but we never really reviewed them before. And frankly, that's really because they haven't really interested us that much. You know, the whole smartwatch, connected watch thing is kind of a hot topic, or it was maybe a year or so ago when the Apple Watch was really first coming out. You know, is it going to change the industry? Are mechanical watches out? And I think we all can tell now that it isn't really going to change the industry. They're just part of the industry. And in my personal opinion, I really see the smartwatch, connected watch, not even trend, but the fact that they're here, the part of it, it's really the evolution on the digital watch and the quartz watch. You know, so long as this technology exists, why wouldn't you want it if you're getting a digital watch or, you know, a quartz watch to have something, let's just say a non-mechanical watch in this sort of price range? Because you get all these additional features, and it's just kind of, you know, up to date with current technology. So they're part of the industry, they're part of the marketplace, and they're starting to get cool. And Kronaby was really the first one that stood out to us for a couple reasons. One, they had good watch designs. That's kind of a fundamental issue I've seen with a lot of the smartwatches and connected watches out there. They just haven't been that good looking. So, you know, looking at them first as watches before looking at the features, you know, they have to be appealing looking. They have to have good watch design. And frankly, up until this point, I just haven't found them to be too compelling. So Kronaby came around, and they have actually a very nice line. There are several types of watches. They're either 38 millimeters or 43 millimeters. They come in either two-hand variety or four-hand, which I would include the sub-dial here. So there's like, it's kind of something for everyone. Some are more sporty, some are more dress. The other side of it is just, you know, frankly, what they do isn't been that interesting to us personally. You have the kind of activity tracker watches, which all, you know, have a sub-dial on them. They count up to 100%. And, you know, it's basically a step counter. Personally, I use my phone for that, and I think if you have a smartphone, which most people do, your phone will do that as well. So I haven't found that an overly compelling reason. Is it nice to see on your wrist? Sure, but it's not a reason for me to go out and actually buy a watch. The other thing they'll do, you know, largely is kind of tell you what your phone is doing. So you have a lot of watches that'll buzz, that'll come up with little, you know, images, particularly if they're like an Android Wear, and tell you who's calling or whatever. My phone's in my pocket. I don't need to be told every time it's doing something. It's really not that much of a hassle for me to feel a buzz in my pocket, reach and get it. So once again, that's never been terribly compelling for me personally. And to me, just isn't enough of a reason for the watches to exist. So what Kronaby did that has kind of caught my attention is make something that's much more customizable and has features in it, including all those features I just mentioned, but ones you can really tune to be used the way you want to use them, as well as having new features that I haven't seen in other watches before, smartwatches or connected watches, and really speak towards something a little bit more, you know, about how you lead your life and how you want to, you know, kind of use your watch. So for example, here right now, there's nothing in tracking activity. I have a second time zone here and the normal time. If I hit a button on it, it doesn't tell me something strange, that just tells me the date. So right now I have it set up to be a very, very normal watch. But yeah, so now let's just get into the watch, because there's a whole ton of software, which we'll get into, and features. It's a lot to talk about here. But the watch itself, the Kronaby Apex, in this version, PVD, is $675. So this represents the top of their line price-wise. And $675 isn't inexpensive, but I think you'll see as I go through it, this is built like a very, very nice watch. So it's not like kind of, it does not feel like a watch that should be a couple $100s. I think $675 really actually speaks to the quality you're getting, and the fact that they built, you know, everything from the ground up. So Kronaby makes their own movement. And by movement, what I really mean is the circuit board, antennae, everything that's inside of it, except for the motors. They did tell us specifically they get their motors from SoProd, but they aren't buying like a module, a smart module from somebody and putting it in here. They also developed all their own software. They do all their own watch design. So, this is entirely their ecosystem of a product. Getting back to the watch now, there's too much to talk about with this, but getting back, it's a 43 millimeter case, 52 millimeter lug-to-lug, and 13.9 millimeters tall, and that is to the top of a domed sapphire crystal. So it's a sizable watch, but I have to say, and I think you can see, it wears fairly well on my 7-inch wrist. And that's from kind of a clever use of proportions and actually a really interesting case design. So from the top down, it might look, fairly classic. Obviously, you have long lugs, you have a bezel, but the way it is put together is a little interesting. So the mid case and lugs are actually fairly thin, and then you have this very, very tall bezel on here. It's a few millimeters tall at least, so there's kind of a cylinder coming straight up out of the mid case. That, first of all, just brings your attention to the bezel diameter rather than to this wide diameter on the side. And that is smaller, so immediately you just kind of get a reduction in size from there. And then you'll see how on this, the way it's assembled, that the pushers aren't actually on the side of the case. Typically, on let's say a chronograph or anything, the crown and the pushers would be really mounted on the side of the case, or they'd be cutouts in the side of a case and they'd be going through. Here they're actually mounted above and they're going directly in. So that's actually a very unique detail, and I think it works really, really nicely on this design and makes it unique. Like I said, if this was just not connected, not smart, maybe this was a chronograph, I think I'd find this still very appealing. And that, to me is a success of their design, that I see it as a cool watch before I see it as a cool connected watch. So getting back to it, you have this nice bevel here, polished bevel, which makes the kind of dimensions of the case pop out. And then on the pusher side, you have some nice detailing as well. I love the contrast steel pushers and the little steel collar here on the crown pusher. And then it might be a little hard to see at this distance, but this little collar here that is at this pusher is actually knurled. That just adds like a little bit of a sporty detail, but it's one I really like. I love little finishing kind of tricks like that. Getting in now to the dial, you have this sort of modern pilot feel to it. It's not explicitly a pilot watch, but it's also, it just has that kind of feeling. It reminded us all when it first came in a little bit of an Oris Pro Pilot, but it also has its own kind of unique feeling, but it's definitely on the sporty side. So you have a primary index here of large Arabic numerals and dots on the outside of them. Those are all loomed. They glow icy blue. On the outside, then, you have a chapter ring for minutes. There are no active seconds on these watches, which, for better or worse, it doesn't bother me because, it would probably be a ticking seconds, and I prefer to not see that. I do like that the main dial here is left it has no like smart or connected watch kind of language to it. There's no icons there. There's nothing that isn't kind of typical to what you find. So it's very easy to read, the time on the fly. And then you have this subdial at 6 where there's a lot more going on. So it's a real second dial. So you have 12369 on there. And that's because, as I have it set here, it's actually telling a second time. And then around that, you have 0 through 100. And that is used if you have this set to tell you your activity tracking. That could tell you, of 100% where you are. There's a couple other things you could probably do with that, and you can also switch the activity tracking to be a secondary feature on the main dial as well. But just using it like this, I think that's a really great function. Like, this is a really nice travel watch. Just imagine, you go somewhere, you have the second time zone set to your home. When you land, this syncs to your phone. There isn't actually an oscillator in here. You don't set the time, your phone sets the time. So this will automatically set to the new time you're in, and then you have your home time already set. So it's just like, I think a really nice, simple way for, a traveling watch to work. It's hands-free, essentially. Talking about the fit now, like I said, I think this is a really nice fit for a 43 millimeter watch. I wouldn't obviously run to a 43 millimeter watch personally. I kind of err more in the 40 millimeter range, but having worn this now for a couple weeks, I find it very comfortable. And what's actually nice about it is that although it's a connected watch and it doesn't have a movement in it, it still has the weight of a mechanical watch. It's a substantial feeling watch in a kind of a reassuring way. Everything on here is really solid. Sapphire crystal, 100-meter water resistance. It's built to be kind of a nice rugged watch. This one comes on a bracelet, black PVD bracelet, kind of classic 3-link style. Works with the concept, works with the design. I threw it on a leather strap as well. That looked great. Nice clasp, nice machining all around. Like I said, this is a $675 watch, and it's definitely built to those standards. There's several other ones. We actually have another one right here. This is an example of what their smaller watches look like. 38 millimeters here, 2 hands, so you don't have the sub-dial. But that's a great looking watch. If that wasn't a connected watch, I would still find that a very appealing watch. And I think that's a really big success for the brand. So now we have to get into the software and functionality of the watch, which there's a lot to go through, and it's very impressive. So with the Kronaby connected watches, the watch is really only half the story. I mean, it's really the app that is powering it. In fact, the watches themselves are really kind of like puppets, with the app being the puppeteer. It doesn't matter which Kronaby watch you get. What it's going to do is essentially all controlled by the app. So the watch is sort of this representation of all the setup that you're doing here. I mean, even the time is really being told from the phone and sent to the watch. So it's kind of a strange way to think of a watch. It's very different from your standard quartz or mechanical timepieces. But without getting too much into that, the software that Kronaby created, which, like I said, they create themselves. This is all their own product. To me, is a very interesting, and I think speaks to, it's very intuitive, it's very clever, and I think also speaks to something that as it grows, as they develop it, will be a very, very powerful tool that'll make these connected watches all the more interesting. So this is kind of a home screen. For when you first set it up, you have to connect it, and you do a little calibration and all this other stuff, but this is the home screen when you open it on every day. You see your watch here, and it's a direct correlation to your physical watch. Then you have these different settings, or these different menus. So if I click on watch face here, it brings up essentially the settings for the sub-dial and for what the main crown pusher does. And those are represented by those 2 circles. So I can remove what are called the complications. You'll see the watch actually just adjusted. So now the sub-dial isn't doing anything. I can set it to daily 100, and it should in a second jump to there you go. So I'm about 40% done of my walking goal for the day. And then if I want to check it set second time on the main dial, nothing will change immediately. But if I push the button here, it'll show the second time, which right now is set to LA. I can then, let's say, go into second time zone, change that time zone, pick another city somewhere in the world, Casablanca, go back, and now when I hit that, it's showing me the time in Casablanca. Really, really simple, really intuitive. Let's say I don't need that at all. I just want the date. Push that, and that'll show the date. It takes a second to update. So now, it's saying it's the 14th, which is shown on the minute track. All really simple, really clever. I liked keeping it on the second time zone on the sub-dial, because I like seeing the second time there. And then you could use, let's say, the timer function. This is really cool. I'm not going to be able to show you the whole thing, but basically the timer, when you hit it, everything goes to 12, and then you push and hold the crown, and now it's setting minutes. When I release it, it is now going to count backwards from 5 minutes. It's not really going to show anything, and every minute it'll jump, but after 5 minutes, it'll buzz your wrist a bunch of times to let you know your timer went off. Really simple, really convenient, it's there. I was a little surprised to find that there wasn't like a classic chronograph function, because this watch seems so set up for that. You have the 2 pushers, which would obviously be good for start and stop. You could use the minute hand here as a second hand, and then that sub-register for 60-minute and 12-hour, which would have been really cool. But I imagine, and one of the really cool things that we learned about this watch is that they're constantly updating it. They're constantly building new features, and they can do whatever they want with it. So enough people want a chronograph, they very likely will develop a chronograph mode for this. I mean, and you can't really say, I don't know if Fossil is going to listen to you if you complain to them that it's missing your function. Maybe they will, I don't know, but Kronaby is a small enough company that can be reactive like that, which is very cool. Going back now, next is filtered notifications. So this would be, basically when it's going to tell you various things. So you have these 3 columns: vibration 1, 2, and 3. Vibration 1 is like a long vibration, which is indicated by that line. 2 is 2 pulses. 3 is 3 small pulses. And you can just clear all of these things away, and start over. So now, you could clear that, make it totally empty. It's not going to do anything. If you want all texts will buzz, you can go and, there's just all these different things you can do. There's different step goal, get moving, stuff like that. Get moving would be like, oh, I haven't stood up in a long time. A calendar, I have a meeting coming up. Or you can use specific apps. So let's say Instagram. Now, whenever somebody likes an image of mine on Instagram, it'll buzz. That could get very annoying. Maybe you don't want that, kill it. So it's just really cool. It's really simple. If you want to be notified, you can. If you don't, clear it all out. It's not for you. Go back. Pushers. Pushers are like the main dial. They have what they call triggers, but they kind of act like complications. But they're very kind of different and strange. So right now I have it set up as find phone. So if I push this, it would make my phone make a little sound, which is cool. If you lose your phone, if you're prone to doing that, that's a very easy way. I've actually had to call my phone via like a weird web page, which is an annoying thing to have to do. So you don't have to do that anymore. Music control, play, pause. Really simple. You can trigger your camera shutter. You can mute phone, which actually, mute phone is a little deceptive sounding. That's like if somebody calls you and you don't want to pick up, hit that and it'll silence the call, which actually is extremely convenient, I find, especially if you're like in a meeting or something and your phone goes off, you forgot you left it on. Remember the spot drops a pin on a map. And this is where it kind of gets a little different. Like, okay, I just went to a bar I really liked. I'm going to drop a pin. And I just did that with my watch. I didn't have to take my phone out. That's different. That's cool. That kind of speaks to like how I lead my life and different things, that aren't necessarily your typical smartwatch, connected watch sort of activities. Walk Me Home is perhaps the most interesting function that this watch has right now, currently built into it, but it's also very, very specific. So Walk Me Home, if you were to put this up on, basically, let's say I was going for a late night walk and I didn't necessarily feel totally safe doing that. I'd push this button and it would signal a chosen contact of mine and tell them I'm walking. Before even doing that, though, it would actually go through a process of setting up, essentially setting them up as your buddy. It sends them a text message, and it does this all very seamlessly. It sends them a text message, it'll get them to download an app, and then you're kind of connected to them. So I hit this, it tells my buddy I'm walking, it drops a pin where I am, and then if I were to, say, get like scared, if I were to fall and hurt myself, you can imagine many different situations, you push and hold one button, you tell your friend there's an emergency. So, I mean, that's like a really kind of a powerful tool. You can imagine a lot of situations. If you give this to your teenager you want to keep an eye on, if you're, are on a college campus and you don't feel, there's like a million different reasons. It's there, and that's just, something I've never seen in a smartwatch or a connected watch, and I think it just speaks to a more kind of human approach to the watch than just being an accessory to a cell phone. Let's see, what else? Activity, that is just a visual representation of your goals. If you, you don't need to have that displayed on your watch at all, so now you can just go back to the app and look at that. And lastly, you have settings which calibrate. Forget watch would be like erase the watch entirely, and then various help, etc. So, I mean, I think you can see just how simple this is and how easy it is to go through. And I was really impressed by that. I've messed around a little bit with some Android stuff or even the Apple Watch, and parts of them are intuitive, and then you get frustrated because something keeps coming up or something keeps like getting in your face. This is just really, no fuss. I'd say the one, criticism right now is some of the functionality is a little bit limited. I could see them really, but expanding on that and adding a lot more functions, that could be really cool. I think it'd be cool to have like a temperature on here. It'd be cool if there was like a silent minute repeater. That's something I was thinking about. Maybe you hit the button and you're in a movie theater and it vibrates and tells you the hour and such. Like, I imagine that's stuff that they could build. I shouldn't speak for them, but, it seems like they have the capability to do whatever they want. And that's really the power of this phone and this connected watch and, the software they are creating. To wrap up, I think what Kronaby has done here is extremely impressive. It should be pretty clear from the site and from our watch reviews that, I'm a mechanical watch person, and I can be a little bit maybe even cynical about the idea of the smartwatch or connected watch. I'm just, I am stubborn like many a watch enthusiast. So it kind of takes something special to really interest me, and I think that this is that sort of thing. I mean, it's a lot of functionality in a relatively affordable package, not a cheap package. $675 is a totally it's a decent amount of money to spend regardless, and you can obviously get mechanical watches at this price point, but you're not going to get a crazy amount of complications. And what I like that they're doing, and what I think that they're going to continue to do, is build in a mix of those kind of functionalities that speak to an active lifestyle, that speak to mobile, technology, but also speak to interesting things that a watch can do when it's not limited to a kind of a classic movement. And that really kind of sets them apart and makes them unique. Additionally, the watches themselves are really nice looking. There's definitely competition for them out there. I know the Frederic Constant Alpina watches do some similar things, but they're more health tracking. And then there is the Fossil Q watches and Skagen watches and Swatch Group. There's no small amount of competition in this smartwatch, connected watch kind of community that they're working in. But from what I've seen, this is so far kind of the most impressive product and kind of the furthest to kind of creating a reason for the connected watch to exist, in my book at least. So please read the full review on Worn and Wound and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.